Hey everyone, it's Jen Fishburne. Welcome back to my show, Preterism Changes Everything. And today we're going to talk about the death of Adam. So let's find out what is it, and we're going to examine all the different possibilities out there. I know this is something that people debate quite a bit. Not sure I have all the answers, but at least we can take a look and see what we can come up with, all right? So let's take a look at what we could see. The first one is physical. Now, Adam lived for 930 years, right? So probably wasn't physical death. All right, the second one is spiritual. All right, so this one's a real popular one. I did look up a definition for spiritual death, and kind of what I saw across the board was immediate separation from God. Except that's not what we see. Many people will say that we are all born spiritually dead, but there's really nothing in Scripture that indicates that. There was a type of death that was associated with sinning against the law of Moses, but that law does not come about for another couple thousand years. Now, besides that, the Bible does not tell us that Adam was immediately separated from God. Instead, we see that God came looking for Adam afterward, and then he showed him grace and mercy. Yes, there were consequences, and yes, he was kicked out of the garden, but nowhere does it say that God turned his back on Adam and refused to speak to him again, nor does it say anything about a spiritual death where Adam is separated from God. If that were true, then anytime anyone sinned of any sort, then there should be immediate separation from God, and God would literally have nothing to do with anyone who ever walked the face of the earth except Jesus. Everyone that God spoke to in the Bible was a sinner already. Did God pick and choose certain ones to shun in spiritual death? Where do we see that God shunned Adam? A death sentence is the next one, all right? So the death sentence is where they begin to die, but it takes 930 years. All right, now only 3 known men lived longer than Adam: Noah, Jared, and Methuselah. If someone gave me a death sentence for 930 years, I would literally be one of the oldest people to ever walk the face of the earth. If Adam was merely given a death sentence, then everyone else must have been given a much greater death sentence, because we've all lived much shorter lifespans than Adam has, right? So nope, I'm going to cross that one off the list too. All right, next one is called the Idiomatic Theory. That means it was really just an idiom. It's a Hebraic idiom that the word death, or as we translate in the English, surely die. It just means certain, or as certain as. And here's a couple of verses that people will use for that one. 1 Kings 2:37. For it shall be on the day you go out and cross the brook Kidron, know for certain you shall surely die. Your blood shall be on your head. And Exodus 10:28. Then Pharaoh said to him, Get away from me, take heed to yourself and see my face no more. For in the day you see my face, you shall die. Now, there's nothing in the text to indicate that God was playing with words here with Adam. Did God really mean that Adam would die that day? Or did he just really mean that he would die someday? If it was really just someday, why didn't God say, hundreds of years after you eat of it, you shall surely die? Or, if you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will not live forever. Instead, he said, in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. So, the two passages that use this surely die as a Hebraic idiom, we have to look at everything in context. So just because a Hebraic idiom or metaphor or any kind of a figure of speech is used at some point in the Bible does not mean that that same figure of speech means, or that same word is a figure of speech in other passages. So it could be a figure of speech in 1 Kings and Exodus, but that does not mean it was a figure of speech here with Adam. There's nothing to give us that indication. And I really have a hard time with thinking that the story of the Bible begins with any figures of speeches, because it's laying a foundation. The first part of the Bible, the first 11 chapters especially, are laying a foundation. They are concrete, they are clear. It's like talking to a child. They want to lay out all the bits and pieces. I don't think there's any hidden mysteries in the beginning of the Bible. I think it's laid out very, very clear. It tells us exactly what it is that we need to know, and we don't have to guess, oh, is there some secret word here that we don't really understand? I just don't see that at all. It's kind of you have to crawl before you can walk, before you can run type of things. We're in the crawling stage of the Bible. We're just beginning to understand the beginning parts of what it's all about here. You don't use metaphors that you would use as an adult to talk to a child. Should be child language in the beginning of the Bible. That's what I see here. All right, so I'm going to cross that one off my list too. Next one is what I call day-age theory. Now, I don't know if that is actually the correct name for this view or not, but it is very similar to the day-age theory of creation, where one day equals 1,000 years. And so Adam literally died within or less than 1,000 years from the day he sinned, 930 years, right? Now, some will even add the 70 years from the birth of Christ to the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in AD 70. So that's a 70-year span there, to the 930 years of Adam's life, and add those up and come up with 1,000 years. Although, again, we see nothing in Scripture that even hints at that math. But let's take a look at some verses here. All right, so first verse they come up with this one is 2 Peter 3:8. With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day, right? Context is king. Whenever you're studying the Bible, that is just one of your top rules. Context is king. The context of 2 Peter had everything to do with the end of the story of Israel, had nothing to do with the story of Adam at all. They're two completely different stories, different authors, different parts of the book, different everything. Different time periods, there's several thousand years in between them. There's nothing alike. They just had nothing to do with one another. As preterists, though, we like to ask other people if God can tell time, right? And we point to all the time texts in Scripture. Now, if you're not a preterist, don't worry. We're going to get to all of those way down the road in this study. But do we think if God could tell time at the end of the story, then couldn't he also tell time at the beginning of the story? Why would he be so confused as to confuse a day and 1,000 years and then not give us anything in context to indicate that? Again, it has to be in context. If there is a metaphor, it has to be in context. If there is a vision, it has to be in context. If it is a myth, if it is a parable, if it is an analogy, if it is, what else do we have here? If it's a type and a shadow, anything other than just a straightforward reading, there is something in the context that will tell us that. If there's nothing in the context that tells us it's something other than a straightforward reading, it has to be a straightforward reading. It has to be, okay? All right, so now let's see. So the Hebrews had several words that they could use to express periods of time longer than a day. So let's look at a few of these that Moses wrote about. Now, Moses may have authored or edited the story of creation. And so let's look and see how he has used other words that are time texts, basically. So the first time text we see is the word moed, and that's translated as seasons in Genesis 1:14. And we've looked at that once already, and God said, or Elohim said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark seasons and days and years. So we actually see in this verse we have three time frames: seasons, days, and years. So seasons could be for any group of time, right? Days, the second one that we see, is actually the word yom, which is used here in the day that Adam ate of it, he would surely die. And the third one is years. And so if it was really going to be years before Adam died, then God could have used that word, or Moses could have used that word as well. So we see all three words here. And of those three, the one that was used was yom, for day. Okay? Now, maybe Adam was just in the season of death for 930 years? I don't think so. That doesn't make sense. All right. Olam is the next Hebrew word here. That's translated forever in some English Bibles. Let's look at how it is in Genesis 6:3. Then Jehovah said, my spirit will not contend with man forever, or with man olam, for he is mortal. His days will be 120 years. So here we have olam with it, which is forever, or age, actually, or a long time, basically. So my spirit will not contend with man for a long time, for he is mortal. And then his days, the word days again, will be 120 years. So plural for days could add up to years, but singular for day, no. All right, so we have all of these words in here. The next one, olam, with the word dor. So olam dor is translated as all generations in Genesis 9:12. And Jehovah said, this is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations, olam dor, to come. All right, so that just tells us that that the word can be used for a bigger picture here than just something singular like that. All right. And then we know that olam really just means a long time, right? We studied that yesterday, or even an age. Is 930 years a long time? I think so. Wouldn't olam have been a much more accurate word to use than day? In the olam that you eat of it, you shall surely die. In the age that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Or in the long time that you eat of it, you shall surely die. After a long time after you eat of it, you shall surely die. Doesn't that make more sense? All right. So tamid is another word that Moses could have used. It's rendered continually in English in Leviticus 24:2. Command the Israelites to bring you clear oil of pressed olives for the light, so that the lamps may be kept burning continuously. Was Adam just continuously dying for 930 years? He was under this long death sentence, continuously. That's a long time to be under a death sentence, 930 years, right? So he could have used that. He didn't. Now, if ages were meant... All right, my battery is dying. Hopefully this will last long enough till I'm done. If ages were meant in the Genesis creation account, why was the word yom, for day, used rather than the Hebrew words that could all indicate long periods of time? So of the ones that we looked at, I think olam definitely would have been the most accurate for what we're seeing for all of these other ideas, the day-age theory, and the, what did I call it here? The idiomatic theory, and the death sentence where he was just sentenced to die. All of those theories could have just been, the word olam would have been a much better word to use than yom, for day. All right, let's go into the next one, excommunication. All right, there are many different kinds of death. So divorce, getting fired, getting kicked out of a club or a church, a loss of relationship for any reason is certainly a type of death. Adam was kicked out of the garden, the only home that he had ever known, a paradise where life was good and pleasant, love and peace and joy abounded, and where he could literally walk with God. Yes, he lost all that. That was a major death to the only form of life that he knew at the time. But again, if that was the type of death Adam would experience, why didn't God say, in the day you eat the forbidden fruit, I will kick you out of the Garden of Eden? I do think Adam experienced a sense of relationship death here, but not total abandonment by God. We just don't see that at all. His relationship with God was altered, but not dead. God did not say, in the day you eat of it, I will never speak to you again. We don't see that at all. All right, next death. Death of innocence. Absolutely. There was a death of innocence that day. Now, Adam and Eve experientially knew good and evil, right from wrong, and they were ashamed. I think that death was implicitly implied in the very name of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I absolutely think this was a death for Adam. But was it the only form of death? That's what we need to find out, right? Next one, substitutionary. Now, I touched on this yesterday. 2 animals died so that Adam and Eve could wear some nicer clothes than fig trees. Is that the only reason they died? The animal skins literally covered them. This is what the word atonement means, to cover up. Now, some people thought that I was just saying that this was the first religious sacrifice, the sacrifice of atonement, but that is not what I am saying. I want to make that really, really, really clear. So these substitutionary deaths, where the animals died instead of Adam and Eve, set a pattern for sacrificial religious sacrifices later on. But I would not call this first death a religious sacrifice. Remember, everything that is happening so far is simply laying the foundation for the rest of the book. So we are beginning with baby steps here. The religious rituals will grow out of these things. But this seems to me to clearly be a substitution, an animal life for a human life, which allows God to show mercy and grace to Adam and Eve. Otherwise, the fig leaves that Adam and Eve came up with would have been just fine. But their works were not accepted by God. God chose not only the consequences, but to kill 2 animals instead of Adam and Eve dying that day. Now, what I personally see regarding the death of Adam is relationship change, but not a complete death of relationship. The death of innocence, for sure, and a substitutionary death. The others simply do not line up with either scripture or with common sense to me. There may be one other kind of death, though, and we will take a look at that one on Monday. Let me know what you think. I know that not everybody's going to agree with me, but let me know where my reasoning is wrong on these types of death. All right, hope you guys have a great weekend. See you on Monday. Bye.